Yes, state.
Okay, roll call. Okay.
Jizzle. Neal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Luce.
Here.
Zittergruen. Here. Hadley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Hearing none. Historic Preservation Committee Annual Report. Mark.
Well, I'm Mark Mugley, and I'm back again for our annual report required by Decorah's status as a certified local government. I want to begin by thanking my hard-working fellow Historic Preservation Commissioners, Mark Branham, Kathy Buzza, Adrian Coffeen, Haley Jackson, Diane Scholl, and Judy Vanderlinden. Tonight I'll highlight just a few activities from our printed report. First, as I predicted a year ago, in March, the Federal Department of the Interior endorsed our boundary increase nomination for the Broadway Phelps Park Historic District. The 1911 Federal Post Office, now the Public Library, and the 1918 St. Benedict Church are notable buildings, and they now assume a prominent place within this rich district. As you may remember, we have since 2017 been working to catalog and celebrate local architect Charles Offelish. Our city-based website went live last spring, and in the fall we released the small brochure that I've given you, funded by the hotel motel tax. We appreciate that several of you joined a capacity crowd at the Mound Street Offelish home for the brochure's October launch party. Thanks to the Chamber for developing the brochure, to Jeremy Brill for the maps, City for agreeing to make occasional web updates. And since this was a self-directed project, our commission members deserve great thanks for all of the research they did on this. And just to keep the education process going, I've got more copies of the brochure if there's anybody who walks in who wants one. And remember to check out the back page link to the website, because there's 20 times the content on the web as there is in the brochure. In 2022, we started a major project called Significant Decorah Properties. Using other resources and our own reconnaissance, we are developing what will be a comprehensive but ever-expanding list of important Decorah properties not included on the National Register, although we use the National Register standards for significance, integrity, and age. Some of these properties may eventually be nominated to the register, but most will simply be highlighted as important threads in Decorah's visible historic fabric. The list runs from small mid-19th century brick homes associated with Decorah's earliest immigrant families down to buildings like this one, constructed just 60 years ago, a mid-century modern classic designed by, surprise, Decorah's preeminent architect, Charles Offelish. It's out of concern for buildings like this one and the backside of Water Street that the Commission feels a continuing stake in the Belton and Mank North Alley survey on the Council's decisions about that space. The Commission continues to ponder the worldwide impact of climate change. A couple of years ago, I quoted architect Carl Elefante, "The greenest building is the one that is already built," a catchphrase grounded in a nuanced demonstration that preserving a building is always the most energy-efficient choice, even when the demolished building is replaced with a LEED certified building. Of course, we recognize that demolition is sometimes appropriate with considerable reluctance. For example, we endorsed Vesterheim's plan to demolish the Carey buildings, and we believe the new Vesterheim Commons will justify that decision. But there are still too many occasions when demolishing a building is assumed to be smarter than renovating or rehabilitating. and that's one of the reasons this commission exists. In '22, our commission also began to explore a possible State of Iowa designated Decorah Cultural and Entertainment District. We appreciate the program's emphasis on the synergy between historic preservation, the arts, entertainment, and walkability. Wonder Woman Jessica Rilling at the Chamber has taken charge and is now coordinating a group of a half dozen stakeholders, including the mayor as the city's representative, to work towards a possible application due May 1st. We continue to appreciate the opportunity for our commission to provide background and responses to C3 building, sign, and mural permit applications. And we thank Greg Swanson for so efficiently including us as he has coordinated these applications. We also appreciate the city's ongoing funding for the commission's continuing education. 2 of us attended the Mason City 2022 Preserve Iowa Summit, and 2 of us have proposed a session for the Sioux City 2023 Summit. In '22, because we had for 2 years dramatically underspent our budget because of COVID conference cancellations, we used part of our funding to pay IROC of Calmer to develop the city's Awfulish website. Thank you for your continued support and your recognition that our work is not outside advocacy, but part of city government itself. I've undoubtedly used my 5 minutes, but I'm open to questions or responses.
I know I've gone on and looked at that website. It's extremely fascinating, the items that are on there and the history that includes. It's very nicely done.
We've learned a lot of things, and we continue to learn new things, like Randy Schissel's father laid the brick on the house up on Upper Broadway that Hjalmar Carlson built in 1957. So they're interesting connections.
Cool. Any questions, comments?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Mark. Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the January 3rd, 2023 regular council meeting. B, minutes of the January 9th, 2023 work session. C, minutes of the January 10th, 2023 work session. D, minutes of the January 17th, 2023 regular council meeting. E, minutes of the January 30th, 2023 work session. F, claims. G, tax abatement, Adam and Chelsea Bohr, 2342 Shagbark Lane Road, new construction. H, consider renewal of special Class C retail alcohol license for Mabes. I, consider renewal of Class E retail alcohol license Hy-Vee. J, consider approval of new tobacco permit Decorah Vape and Smoke. And K, reappointment of Mary Ann Humple to the Regional Housing Authority Board.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Motion made by Olson, seconded by Johnson. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Conduct public hearing regarding fiscal '24 maximum property dollars. Do you want to do a background on that, please?
Sure, so this background will blend over into the actionable item number 7. So state law requires a maximum property tax dollar hearing be held prior to adopting prior to adopting the maximum levy rate if the proposed dollars amount to more than 2% or an increase in tax dollars asked. I'm emphasizing dollars, and that comes into play in a little bit. The increase as listed is 8.46%, and those are of the levies included at a rate of $13.28. However, this is not the entire levy nor total dollars asked of the city's budget. Debt service is not considered as part of this hearing, and so if all levies were included, the increase is 6.47%. So I'm emphasizing dollars well, when we move on to 7, I'll keep going.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution approving the proposed fiscal '24 maximum levy rate.
Okay, so I'm emphasizing dollars because that was an emphasis of this legislation to make any time the city was going to request more than an increase of 2% in the tax dollars for those specific levies, this hearing had to be held. Also, where this comes into play is right now Senate File 181 is in the legislature. It was approved by the Senate. It had a subcommittee meeting in the House today. Has not been assigned to committee yet, I believe. But if Senate File 181 were to pass and be signed by the governor, it does not change this max levy because this max levy focuses on dollars. SF 181, however, will change the levies themselves because it recalculates the residential rollback, and so it will push up all our levies a little bit. So the department management is telling us, continue advancing your budget as you would, because again, SF 181 is not law currently, so we have to continue to operate under the existing law.
Questions
So
or
just
comments?
for clarity and Emily's simple reiteration, right? So if SF 181 was to pass, the levy rate we decided on will go up, but not beyond the max levy rate.
Because the max levy rate, as
Right.
this is considered, is focused on the dollars. So the dollars will stay the same, but the levy rate will go up. And then this resolution has to be approved before council can set a public hearing on the regular budget.
I'll make a motion that we pass resolution approving the proposed fiscal year 24 max levy rate.
Lewis will second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Luce. Further discussion? Roll call?
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Consider resolution setting public hearing for proposed fiscal year '24 budget, March 6, 2023.
All right, state law requires a public hearing be held before the adoption of the budget. We're proposing March 6th as the date. This allows for publication requirements and meet the current approval deadline of March 31st. However, so this proposed budget is based on council work sessions from the 9th and 10th of January. If SF 181 is approved by the House and signed by the governor, this public hearing may become moot and we have to redo the budget. The county auditor would have to certify us new figures for which the taxable valuations are based on. It would also extend that deadline to April 30th, so we'd have 30 days to get the math part figured out and reset the public hearing before we can approve the budget. And again, Department of Management is recommending we move forward with the process.
If we have to do that, would we still have to have two more or just one?
Just the one
Okay.
public hearing.
Okay.
But we'll have to have another 2 10-hour sessions of budget meetings probably.
Hope not.
Okay.
Okay.
I move a resolution setting the public hearing for the proposed budget on March 6th.
Second.
Moved by Zittergruen, seconded by Chisel. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none. Roll call?
Zittergruen?
Aye.
Chisel?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Consider resolution setting public hearing for Decorah Generators Mitigation Project.
This is the FEMA grant funding that we've been awarded. As part of the procurement process and competitive bid requirements, we need to hold a public hearing before purchasing these, and that public hearing would be scheduled for March 6th.
Make a motion to set March 6th as the public hearing day for Decorah generation, or generators mitigation project.
Second. Oh,
Okay, motion made by Olson, seconded by Luce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal.
aye.
Consider preliminary resolution for construction of Decorah 2023 alley improvement project. Can you give background, please, on that?
Yeah, so part of the street plan for this year included alley resurfacing. Staff's identified the alley south of Center Avenue between Riverside Avenue and Second Street to be reconstructed as part of this. Alleys have typically had a portion assessed back to the adjacent property based upon the direct benefit received by the work. The resolution is drafted to assess 4 inches of asphalt paving, approximately 10 feet wide, with a 2-foot concrete flume for drainage where needed, along with rock base. This assessment approximately can range between 20 and 50% of the estimated cost of the total improvements. Where this is deviated from years past is the previous assessments have been just for 4 inches of asphalt and have been closer to only 10 to 15% of the total project costs.
So why is this one more?
This is based on some of the conversation during last year's assessment process. We're proposing a resolution for council consideration that assesses more of the project to the adjacent properties.
I have a question, Travis. I'm just curious on the rationale for discussing the policy after we consider this potential resolution.
They're kind of one and the same. We were thinking that arguably we could have put the policy beforehand, but
I guess
just
I'm
in sequence of.
more just hoping it's okay to discuss the policy, decide what the ideal is first before we pass a resolution related to a specific project. So I hope that conversations about the policy itself are in bounds for this item.
So if
That's
I,
how we were treating it.
if I could just jump in, this resolution, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, really directs staff to start the project. This will be one of many steps in the process. So I think you can still have this discussion afterwards because it really has no bearing on starting the project.
So if we pass this resolution and then in the next thing we decide on a different policy, that we could come back on this one. Is that?
The only thing might be the percentage, John. I think that's the only thing we have in this resolution is the approximate percentage of the project. Otherwise, everything else is pretty basic
Right.
at this stage.
And it's pretty broad.
That's why we put
Right.
it so broad on the percentage side.
If you want to assess more than 50%, then I think maybe you need to have the discussion first.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I think this is a policy that makes sense. Every homeowner with a driveway is responsible for resurfacing their own driveway when the time comes, and an alley serves as a shared driveway for a lot of homes. And I think that ensuring that those who benefit most directly from that alley are the ones who share the costs with the city at a more fair rate seems like a wise move for the city. So I'm in favor of it.
Under the previous policy, what was the percentage that was getting passed on, the assessment for the homeowners? Did you say like
Roughly 10
10
to
or 11?
15.
10 or
The
11?
last one was closer to
So,
15.
Yeah,
right?
percentages are a little difficult because each project's a little different, right?
Right.
Like on this project, for example, we have some street improvements included because they're adjacent to the approach of the alley. We're going to be there. We have a manhole that needs to go in. So those are not things we would expect to be assessed, but they do impact the total percent of the project. So percentages are a little bit tricky, although important. I think the price per linear foot of the assessment is maybe what is a more normalized number. So the past two alley projects, if you look at the other document,
It's 10.
for the next agenda item, it's about $16 or $17. Here we'd be upwards of $39. So It's a larger jump, certainly.
Right.
But it includes, like I said previously, in years past, we've only assessed for the asphalt for one half of the alley adjacent to each property. Here, we're including more components that
Right.
require to get built. But there are things outside that are still not getting assessed. Mobilization, traffic control, seating, all those things are still not included in that number.
Right. Okay.
So we're still on 10, and then some of the stuff we're talking about really has to do with 11.
Right.
And as far as just specific to item 10, there will be further actionable items of council that actually establish the maximum assessed value, which I think, as Jeremy pointed out, there's a series of resolutions that are required on these alley assessment projects.
Yeah, the resolution that'll actually be at your next meeting is a preliminary assessment. So that is where that dollar amount. But like I said, the one thing that is in this assessment is a range of the percentage of the project. So we still have that in there. If you anticipate that changing, then I think we would advise that that language get changed in this resolution before it would be potentially approved.
I'd move for approval.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Zittergruen. Any discussion? Roll call? Oops, sorry.
Wait, we're doing 10, not 11, right?
Yeah, we're doing 10. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
excuse me, Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce.
Okay, motion carried. Now discussion on alley assessment policy.
And I do not have this structured as an actionable item yet. Wanted this to be discussion that we can take further and hone in to create a formal policy for consideration. So a draft policy has been created just to help spur discussion. The policy would assess 4 inches of asphalt paving for half the width of the alley, crushed rock subbase for half the width of the alley, excavation for 1/2 the width of the alley, and 25% of linear footage of concrete drainage flumes. And the way that's worded, I have a house, my neighbor across the alley has a house, we're sharing half of those costs, except for the drainage flumes. Anything within our property lines, half of that cost would be absorbed by the city. The other half would then be split between the two adjacent properties. Now, typically, you don't need drainage flumes on both sides of the alley. So if all of it's on my neighbor's side, I'm still paying for half of his. I'm paying for 25% of the total within that area.
This makes sense.
Currently, we don't have a lot of drainage flumes in the alleys, correct?
Not too many, but we've been adding them.
We really try to avoid it. The areas we've needed them are either in really flat areas or really steep, which is the alleys we've done here recently. But like on the Broadway alley, for example, we just had drainage on about the last 100 feet as it approached the street. Otherwise, everything else was just asphalt. So yes, this would only be assessed if we would need it, and we would try very hard to not need it.
Maybe it just would complicate things too much, but did you consider a draft policy that assessed the cost of the drainage flumes to any property that drained towards that drainage flume? I mean, I could imagine, like it's written just to basically be the property with the drainage flume and the one across the alley.
Mm-hmm.
But I assume that a drainage flume often drains, half of an alley or more. I'm just wondering about spreading those costs a little more widely if the drainage flume indeed serves. Is that just too complicated? Maybe I don't know how much a drainage flume costs, and we're talking about a few dollars. I don't.
It's a more considerably, or it's a higher cost than you would imagine, as opposed to the asphalt and the sub base. But my question to John is, based on assessment, the way assessments are done, if it's an improvement made as part of the total project in my area, but is it a benefit I observe? Because assessments have to be the private gain I see out of that project.
Yeah, I mean, the code calls it specially benefited, and there's no magic formula, but you have to show, property can't be assessed more than its special benefit or 25% of the value of the property. So I mean, I could see an argument, that other properties that you can show are benefited by that flume for the drainage. You could assess part of that cost, especially if they're, the way I view it, maybe I've got the engineering wrong. If their runoff ultimately goes across there, I could see an argument for that. I think the further away you get, though, you might have a tougher time if you were ever challenged showing the special benefit. But that's what you look at.
Well, we don't need to.
It versus the public benefit too.
Right.
So courts would weigh the benefit of the individual property owner versus what's the benefit to the public at large.
I appreciate the context, and maybe my question could simply be taken as if this is worth pursuing on staff's part as they, work towards final language, please consider it. I think that for me, to the extent that it's legal and fair to more widely spread the cost of the project to all the benefiting households, I think that's a worthy target to shoot for. Also, you kind of want everyone to be equally, it would stink if I got assessed, $5,600. It would stink for my neighbor if they had to get assessed twice that or something.
Steve, are you just
What is it?
suggesting that we split the cost of the flume itself or the entire project itself?
Well,
amongst all
the flume itself, I think the rest of the project is
Right.
going to go by
Okay.
linear
Yeah.
feet.
Wait, my
No,
guess, I thought the city was covering the flume,
Half.
half the flume.
And in this case, the flume extends the full length of the project. So I think what you're getting at is if we extended it, had half of the project, like I mentioned for Broadway, where only 100 feet had a flume, how do you spread that out amongst the entire alley, correct?
At least the places where the drainage benefits it. And we're talking about a policy for future alley assessment projects, so I guess I didn't know the specifics of this project, but
Well, and it could still be incorporated in this specific project.
What's the, what's an average, I know it's gonna be a hard question, but what's the average square linear foot that people own on an alley?
You mean what?
It's the lot
responsible frontage?
dimensions, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's gonna vary based on subdivision, so
50,
flat is 52 and a half.
52,
Some
53
have
feet on this
doubles.
project is an
Okay.
average.
So it's not like 500 feet.
No.
Okay.
But there's at least one here that has a double lot. There's maybe one other that has a lot and a half. So there's 106-foot frontage for one property on this project.
Would it be possible to focus more on the percentage rather than the materials or whatnot, so that if we also have if we decide to do a semi-permeable or other, as things change, right now we're doing it this way, but maybe we've got one that just has to be done in Portland because of terrain, and then we're looking at it again in a special feature. Was the goal of this just to simplify assessment rather than having to come back every time?
I think so. Really, there's no, as far as I'm aware, adopted assessment policy. There's been different strategies for different projects, but we thought it would be good to have a policy, and that's why we're having this discussion, is what would you like to see in that policy?
Right.
Are we also gonna do a street policy, street assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
is it worthwhile, since we're talking about establishing a soft precedent here? I mean, we can't bind the hands of future councils anyway if they wanted to do this differently. But since we're talking about setting a soft precedent, is it worth discussing the alleys abutting Water Street, for example, as being less directly beneficial to simply the landowners on either side? That has benefits for municipal commerce and getting delivery vehicles off of Water Street and all sorts of other things. I'm curious, do we want to make a carve out for those alleys in more dense commercial districts?
We could. My understanding is Decorah historically has actually been more heavily handed on assessments when it's been commercial project or commercial property related than residential. But most of that's been on the street side. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any history on any commercial alley improvements.
I would have to check back to the Water Street. I think in general your statement's correct, though. When it's commercial, it tends to be a little bit
There
higher.
wasn't much alley work done in the Water Street.
North, like,
Yeah, north,
Daysby
yeah.
Lane, I guess, is a street, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, South Alley hasn't had much done recently. It's coming, though.
Yeah, I guess I would, I mean, I would think the nature of it spreads it out to the businesses anyway, because it's dense, right? So it would spread it out. So I guess I'm not sure that I would see the need for a carve out there.
Okay.
Pretty narrow frontages.
Yeah,
typically.
yeah, they're pretty narrow and,
Yeah. So,
and long, so you got a lot of people
Okay.
working on it.
Okay, there's no action on this, but
No, just discussion that we'll take away, try and formalize a policy. Again, doesn't necessarily need to be adopted at that time, but we can hone it in hopefully from there.
I like the idea of having our policies adopted before we have a project. So this ends, I would like to see a street assessment project too.
policy.
Policy, street assessment policy, yes, yes.
Thanks
We
for
can
the
do
work.
both if you
Thanks for
want.
the work staff.
Yeah. Well, I just know that when we did Maine, I like the model of how we did Maine and the thought behind it, which was not assessing.
okay. Discussion and possible action regarding Iowa legislation. Want me to time you?
Right. So I didn't mean to scratch my head for dramatic effect, but it's kind of
I
fitting.
just want to be clear, this is where we can talk about succeeding from the state, right?
It could fit. I mean,
Okay.
John might say no, but so
Maybe
I did.
What I should do is hand him the gavel and then he
No.
can say.
So I did have this agenda item placed on here as a possible action item. Should council want to take some kind of action, direct staff to prepare communications with legislators. So there is the potential there, but not necessarily required. I've talked a little bit about SF 181, which used to be Senate Study Bill 1056, and everything's trending towards this is going to pass. And what happened was in 2021, when property tax law was changed by legislation, then multifamily residential was to become part of the residential tax classification. And they changed this section of code over here that said that. But they did not change the section of code over here that said, here is how we calculate the residential rollback formula, and did not put multifamily residential as part of it. So with that oversight being caught, sadly in October, but not necessarily being communicated well,
Or at all.
or at all, but so the Department of Revenue caught this in October and said, all right, the residential rollback, as state law says, is 56.4919. Residential property tax in Iowa, we don't pay 100% of our assessed valuation. That gets rolled back loosely based on the price of corn and soybeans. I don't want to get into that real in depth, but when this error is corrected and the residential rollback is recalculated, it will reduce the rollback further by 1.84%. What that amounts to for the city of Decorah is based on my calculations, a minimum hit to the city of Decorah of $80,000 to the general fund. Everything points that that's coming. So we may have to have some future difficult conversations. So that's SF 181. It is now onto the House for consideration, but everything's pointing at this is coming. But potentially more concerning, Senate Study Bill 1124 and 1125 are two bills that were introduced last week, fairly lengthy bills, cover a lot of different areas, but 1124 would actually limit the valuation growth of a city's taxable valuation even after the rollback is taken into consideration. And then would take it a step further and limit the dollars that could be generated within the 810 general levy. So for the city of Decorah, based on my understanding of the bill and subsequent conversations today, that I believe my numbers are right. If we were to apply this bill to our fiscal 24 budget, we would have to cut a further $61,000 in services or find additional revenue. This would also make changes to several levies that cities can utilize. We've talked about them in budget work sessions, whether it's the rent and maintenance of a civic center. We've talked about a voter-approved library levy. It takes all of these levies that are not part of, wrote something down here for John's pleasure, Iowa Code Section 384.12. If they're not in there, or if they're in there, they all get combined as part of the 810 levy. That, my understanding is, then if we wanted to use an increase beyond 810, what used to be these specific levies, they would have to be voter approved in March of that year, every year. So for fiscal 24, if we wanted to do this, we would have to prepare a budget that does not include the additional amount we want to levy. We'd have to petition the auditor to put it on the ballot for a special election in March to, yes, every year, to basically have the voter-approved levy every year.
And we don't utilize any of those, right?
We did not.
But other communities do, especially the library.
Except
No, you didn't.
this year, we just added the emergency levy.
Okay.
So
We've
the
used it in the
emergency
past,
levy
like
will have to
twice
be
in the last
voted on
10
in March
years.
every year too?
Emergency levy would be part of that. That's gone.
But didn't you say they're taking that away?
That's where I'm getting to. And if the emergency levy goes away, that's an additional $108,000 to the general fund for Decorah.
And we would have no ability to raise property taxes.
Not unless voter approved
Are they
on
gonna
an
pay,
annual basis.
are they gonna pay for the referendum we have to have?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I didn't ask. I'll
So-
remember that though.
So that then cities really would have to borrow. I mean, that's your only option, right? Is that you would borrow money and then put it onto the debt service levy.
So debt service, there are, let's see here. There are, the only levies that would exist outside would be transit, aviation, tort liability, and special funds levy, along with your debt service. However, we'll get into, I think debt service is 1125, maybe. Anyway, getting back to, so 1124, it would also reduce the you've heard me during the MEU discussions and other general discussions about essential corporate purpose versus general corporate purpose. A general corporate purpose for the city of Decorah is $700,000 that we can borrow before it needs to be put out to a referendum. This legislation would reduce that by 30%. Roughly, yeah. Where this really comes into play, and I've posed this question to the Iowa League of Cities, is when you pair this with other legislation that's been introduced that would take TIF, which is a different section of Iowa Code under the economic development, and you take TIF, and there's a bill that would convert that from an essential corporate purpose to a general corporate purpose, and we do development agreements. If it exceeds that amount, I think we would have to have a referendum to approve a development agreement.
What's that amount again?
700,000 times 70 is 490,000.
490.
Yeah,
So if we so essentially we would have had to do a referendum for ID.
Anything.
Right.
500,000 or
Yeah.
above.
Be
Can't buy a
500,000.
fire truck for that.
No, so everything.
General corporate purpose.
Right.
Not essential.
The fire truck is not
Oh,
essential.
fire truck is essential corporate purpose.
Okay.
Fire station, other
Right.
things fire related, general.
So the total budget, potential budget impact of the study bills
So-
is 200,000, 210?
61
right, and then there's lost.
plus
but-
108 plus Senate File 181, which is a correction of an error. So they're not saying it's a lost revenue. It's revenue the city should have never saw in the first place. So that's 80,000. But yeah, that's 240 and change, 200, almost 250,000.
That we would have to cut from our proposed budget.
Anybody want to have the MEU discussion again?
Well,
'Cause I
wait, let
really
me,
think that
let,
it's
let me
like-
hear him answer, okay?
So it gets better. That's sarcasm. 1125 has proposing sweeping changes to lost, where the state sales tax, it's very similar to what we saw last year, where the state sales tax would become 7% as opposed to 6%, and then they would redistribute to cities. However, once they increase the state sales tax, that triggers the Iowa Water Land Conservancy constitutional amendment approved 12 years ago or so. That's gone unfunded. So 3/8 of that cent would go to and then the rest of the allocation of the 1% back to cities would come from this fund that they would create and put the extra sales tax generated plus additional general funds. They have to come from somewhere to create this pool that will then redistribute it back. This one I don't have a greatest amount of clarity on because this one I want to say was like 80 pages long.
I tried to read it this weekend.
And then
One, the longer one.
the backfill would go to general fund
Backfill for cities.
for lost after the clean water.
Oh, so the state
theft.
side, yes, it would go to their general fund, and then they would create the special fund that it would sweep over into, and then that's where they would make the payments distributed. And I believe it's through the year 2043 is what's in this legislation. However, like we had talked about before, with resolutions, you can adopt a new resolution and change what you said you were going to do before. So can the state, so has the state done. So 1125 makes some changes to lost, but it will also, let's see here. There are also additional changes to the water excise tax, commonly referred to as WET, that instead half of that is supposed to go to a water quality financial assistant fund. That now would all go to the state general fund, which apparently has a surplus, and that's why we're cutting taxes dramatically. But we need to apparently find additional revenue for the state general fund. I'm probably going to get in trouble, but yeah. SSB 1125 would also change the commercial industrial tax rollback to 85% in year one, and then 80% in the second year, and carry 80% moving forward. If applied to Decorah's fiscal year 24 numbers, this is a further $102,000 tax cut out of the general fund. So if you're playing at home, that's 330,000 plus.
You said these haven't passed yet, but you think there'll be probably some changes of some sort to them along the road? No one knows what
Yeah,
substantively will change.
we're being told 1124 and 1125 are not going to pass in their current form. However,
This part.
with this, in a 180 Senate File 181, which was Senate Study Bill 1056, that was a little bit of a different beast than this. But that moved through with such speed. It was unreal how fast it moved through the Senate. So these I could see, once they're picked up, move quickly.
So suggestion.
I don't know which one would be worse, quite frankly, to cities. And when asked how best to communicate the impacts of this to our local representatives, I was told we can't focus on the dollar amount.
Okay, then focus on, we'll have to cut police officers, fire department money, park, rec,
Chime in,
city.
John.
focus on what we'll cut. Give me a
Yeah, I
break.
think your police and fire are limited, because I have to go back and look, but I believe there was a law last year passed
yeah.
about reducing the budget of law enforcement. So
Right.
that's going to be, it may not increase, but you're not going to cut it. And
Part of that back to blue bill
So what
legislation that went through.
Water excise, did we drop that when we?
God.
No, that was the sales tax portion.
Sales tax only, okay.
Yep. Yep.
It's like they just are tape.
It's a good thing we didn't do the alley assessment stuff, because they'll all be gravel now.
I was thinking like horse and buggy.
So general fund, we can't cut police and fire, but we can cut our libraries. We can cut our park and rec. We can cut our code compliance things. We can cut our city administration.
Only 10% of us?
Oh, is that protected too?
Well, no, most of our funding comes from water, sewer.
Oh, good. Okay. I mean, in order for people to understand this, I think they have to figure out what they're going to lose, right? And so we have to be able to articulate what it is that's being lost.
What can we make a public statement in reference to this? I mean, as a group or?
You know, and I struggled. I talked a little bit with Lorraine about this today on, you know, do I prepare something ahead of time? Do I, but I, quite honestly, it's too much to wrap my hands around of what do I prepare that best reflects, you know, 7 council members and the mayor's opinion on this legislation. And so the potential action item, to be honest with you, I don't know that it's going to be as impactful as each and every one of you individually contacting our legislators and talking about these impacts.
That's not going to, I disagree, actually. I think if we had a solid council letter, I think well, at least I do, they could care less what I think. But, I mean, honestly, Randy, anyone who votes for him, they're going to listen to more. They're going to listen to people who vote for them. They're not going to listen to me. They will listen to the Decorah city. The city of Decorah says blank.
It's just trying to figure out how you
What is
put that
blank?
into.
Well, I think the
One-
city of
one
Decorah
block
says
is-
your 3 budget bills are essentially like just city killing. I don't know.
One block is about $250,000.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get one less block each year. One more block falls into disrepair.
But it's
I
not
mean, I guess I'm
just.
with Emily. I don't think they're gonna listen to us anyway, but I mean, maybe a group, but I'm worried about what the public perception is gonna be out there when we start cutting everything out of our budget. I mean, most of them don't follow this stuff closely like we have to anyway.
No, but if you have stated a letter to your legislators, at least you can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need a good letter from, I think, the council.
I agree.
We need a good article in the paper. I think we need people from Decorah to write to their legislatures. I mean, this isn't a political issue. This is a fiscal issue, right? I mean, there is sort of a like, can't we all band together, everyone who loves Decorah, red, blue, purple, green, I don't care, and recognize that this is like fundamentally going to change what our city looks like and the services we're able to provide?
So my response, Emily, was very similar to yours when I was told that our response to our legislators should not be based on the dollars. Well, what do you mean? That's concrete.
Who told you
use
that?
that for analysis.
Who told you that?
The Iowa League of Cities.
Well, I don't trust the Iowa League of Cities. They've let us down. They've been letting us down for years.
So here's the, when I say this, it might actually turn you, because it turned me, and it makes sense. Once we tell them the dollar amount, once we say to the state of Iowa, this is going to negatively impact the city of Decorah by $350,000, these 3 pieces cumulatively, great. Our residents deserve a tax break. That is $350,000 a year that we are giving back to our constituents. That is the message they are taking. They're not taking, and I directed staff last week to start preparing what services can we cut. You know, if we don't staff the warming house for the skating rink, what does that amount to for savings? If we reduce hours at the pool or the library, what does that amount to savings? What services do we cut, and what are the negative impacts from that, so that we can quantify? And that's the message we need to take as, all right, we are now, campground is only going to be open we're only going to staff it for 10 hours as opposed to 12. Pool's going to shut down at 6 o'clock at night so that everyone just go home and have supper and nobody come back because we're not paying for staffing at that point. That's the message we're supposed to convey.
Hey, just a
Can-
question,
can-
real quick. What city would this not affect? I would think it would be universal effect. Not, I mean, because the larger cities would be paying more than what we're paying, correct?
Well, and interestingly enough, so this this 1124 would heavily penalize growing cities because it actually caps your growth of your general fund dollars by 3.25%, or even if your population is booming. So if your assessed and taxable valuation is exploding, you have all these additional services to provide your residents, your general fund tax dollars would still have a hard cap. Now, it does create a special division within the state of Iowa that you can appeal and request a waiver from these caps by presenting certain evidence. But this is going to be a difficult one.
There was a comment up on the board that. Okay, all right.
So,
So a community like Waukee that's growing by leaps and bounds is really gonna get hammered unless they can present this.
Well, and that's one of the pieces of that we're being told is going to be carved out, that they're going to, if it's all additional valuation because of residential growth, then they're going to carve out some provision in there that's not going to penalize a growing community.
okay, so for public safety, and Dave, the only reason I'm hitting public safety is because I think people care deeply about it, as do I. So please don't take this as like, I think we should be cutting public safety. I just need language that's gonna like fire people up. And it is like, so we can't lay off public safety, but does that mean we don't have to fill positions? So is there literally no way to make your public safety smaller?
We would still have to provide them the same level of funding.
But it
Correct,
wouldn't- but it
John?
just
I think
wouldn't
it's
increase.
funding. I don't know. It might say services.
Well.
but
I believe it's a dollar amount of funding that you cannot drop.
I will just comment, and I'm loath to do this, but the number is so large that you're not going to recapture $300,000 by reducing your hours at the library or the pool. You are going to have staff reductions.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, that's
Across
what I'm
the
getting
state
at.
of Iowa. I mean, in broad terms, there are going to be people financially impacted by this
So maybe
in our community.
that's the way to go. How many people would we lay off, right? I mean, how many jobs would we be lost? Maybe we quantify it by jobs. $350,000 is how many jobs? And we don't say what jobs, we just say jobs. Because it's all fine and good to talk about taxes, but taxes are jobs. Taxes are services. Taxes are pavement. It's not just money. People aren't, you drive a car on a road, right? So how much do you spend on your car repairs? You spend far more if your roads are shit, right? And you're driving over potholes as opposed to driving over smooth roads. So I may be paying lower taxes, but I'm paying more for my own car. So maybe we equate it to jobs, because that's really what people will, the only thing I think that that's going to fight people's broken mindset about taxes is jobs.
I think it's important to remember that we don't even have to make the case for taxes, which is always a hard case to make, right? I think we can say that the people in the best position to know what the right and wisest levy rates for the city to continue to provide the services that they need to provide are the people the voters put in these seats to do it. And the voters already have a remedy if they think that we are not exercising our duty to set a fair and appropriate tax rate for our community at the ballot box. This is the state legislature undermining the citizens of Decorah who elected us to make these decisions. They're saying that we are going to have our hands tied from providing the goods and services that our community depends on, like the library, like a police budget that grows as police costs increase, because we won't be able to continue to grow budgets if, our hands are tied this way, at the pool, and the quality of our roads, which we already spend a lot on our roads, but maybe we're gonna have to start filling potholes with all those tax savings courtesy of the state government.
Are those the type of things that you would put forth in a letter to the congressman?
So that was the exact argument I took this morning, and I would encourage that if that is the council's desire to do a letter. The council here is elected by, this is the closest form of government you can get. The council is elected to make these decisions on behalf of the residents. We are a democratic republic. That is what you do. If the council is not a good steward of taxpayer money, council members can be replaced based on voter turnout. But as we saw in the last election, when everyone who sought re-election was re-elected, and as we saw tonight with our max levy hearing notice, and last year with our max levy notice, and our budget hearing, and I don't know how many budget hearings before that, nobody shows up screaming about property taxes. So when the state legislator is saying, but Travis, we are hearing from our constituents that property taxes are too high, where are they? Because they're not coming here and saying that.
I mean, I hear from a couple of them, but, you know, they're not, here we are. You cannot get very much more ideologically diverse within the realm of reasonable political difference than is sitting around this table. And we just passed a maximum levy unanimously. And if you can get the 7 of us to all agree that something is wise, then I don't know why a few hundred people in Des Moines should be undermining what our neighbors put us in these offices to do.
And keep in mind, they're not doing it just to us, they're doing it to every city in Iowa.
It is.
In every county, in every school district,
And you
in
could,
any property tax levying entity.
Have you talked to
It's,
anybody?
I think
it's
I
devious
really-
is what it is.
I appreciate what Steve said. I think that's a good avenue. I think it also lost or getting rid of the local option sales tax is a continuation of that, right? So you take a 1% sales tax that voters themselves imposed on their own community to take care of their own needs, and now the state is saying, no, we're going to decide what you get to do with that money. And so, again, I think you could, I mean, essentially it's just the erosion of home rule, both of those things, but I think undermining the will of voters is an important one, but I also think that the loss of jobs is another, personally.
So, is it council's preference that we send some type of documentation to the legislators as a council?
Yes.
And do you have, Travis, some kind of draft or some idea of how you would put that into words for that?
Based on the comments I've heard here, I certainly have enough to draft some kind of correspondence, but
Okay.
if a motion were to be put forward to direct a communication from the city of Decorah, if it could at least hit bullet points,
Okay.
that way if I do put in about, a potential 102,000 because of commercial industrial property tax rollback, and that's not something the council wanted in there, I would just appreciate that.
Can we make a motion right now and do this? It's on the agenda that we can do that. I would make a motion that we authorize Travis Getkin, in consultation with council and with other city council members, to draft a letter that is appropriate to the discussion that we've had tonight.
Second.
Motion made by Johnson, seconded by Olson. Discussion.
Did I cover the points we needed to cover in terms of allowing you to do this in the motion?
I mean, that gives me a lot of flexibility. I'm working with one-offs, and of course, yes, I will, not that I don't want, none of you talk to each other about it by any means, but I will send you all a draft of it before I push it out so that I can at least hear individual comments to myself regarding my draft.
Well, you've been in contact with them as well, the League of Cities and things like that. They made recommendations on what you should highlight and what you should not, so
Yeah.
how we use to go in it.
It would be great to have it printed in full in the paper and on Decorah News if you're both willing. So it'll be more than 300 words, but it'd be great to have the letter in there.
More than 300 words.
More than 300 words, Travis.
Ask Senator Clemish for a,
Might have to have Kristen help.
Comment.
Okay,
Well, you told me some of us like to read the other day.
okay. Any other discussion other than where we're currently going? Okay, roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergren.
Aye.
Motion carried. Please keep watching the news, watching the resources that you get from the state. I know you had sent different links out for people to go to.
So, when specific bills that either, so Daniel Salder, for example, is one of the league lobbyists. When there's a potential bill that he believes will impact Decorah, he'll let me know. But the Iowa League, if you have not signed up for league legislative update, they push those out every Friday. And when they call them like call to action type emails where, hey, this bill's coming, everything's pointed at, it's going to get traction, contact your legislators. They will send that out through that same sign up. So if you haven't already, sign up for that, please.
I signed up for Iowa Capital Dispatch, and they send out updates sometimes once or twice a week or even more.
Yep,
I
and that's a little different format.
Yeah, it is. But it is informative. They send out kind of where things are.
I know this is going to sound insane, but can cities strike? I mean, literally, can city government can cities just be like, sorry, state, you run everything, we're done?
I did ask Travis that today. What if we just say,
I
no,
mean, I
we're not
can't
gonna
imagine
do
there's a
that?
city in Iowa that's like, woohoo, these are great bills. Please pass them.
I sarcastically, I know, hard to believe, right? One of our representatives, when I was over in Humboldt, I ran into him. I went, would you like to prepare this budget for me this year? I mean, while you're at it, I mean, you're making all these, why don't you just prepare this and tell me? It'll cut out the middleman. He didn't find it as funny as I did.
I mean,
but-
Clemish was a mayor, for God's sakes. How can Clemish be doing this?
Well, and I want to say, I want to give Senator Clemish, I don't want to say he's doing it yet. Senate File 181 was passed, 49-0. He did pass that one. But 11, 24, and 25 are both still at the study bill level, so they haven't made it through any kind of vetting.
How much longer are they in session this spring?
Well, they only get paid through end of May.
Oh,
How much
God,
more
we gotta-
damage? How much more damage can they do?
It's not even March yet. It's
Well,
not even March.
March 16th, I think, is the
Could it
first
get any
funnel.
worse?
Hopefully nothing goes through after.
No, I'm serious. How long do they go generally?
May.
It's
Through May?
yeah,
Oh,
it's
good
100
Lord.
days, so it's end of.
I thought it was in
Somebody do
April.
the math for me.
100 days would be like 90.
January.
I thought it was like the end of April.
Yeah, mid-April.
I can't even. $330,000. What really would we cut? I mean, let's be honest. I can't even imagine.
By April 10th, it could be more.
It's an anti-library bill. It's an anti-recreation bill. It's an anti-police
is.
bill. It's a
I think they want us to
pro-pothole
cut
bill.
libraries.
I'm sympathetic to constituents who get their tax bill and it feels like a lot. But, I spend a lot of time looking at our city's budget and, there are probably places where we could trim some fat here and there. But a cut this substantial is not saying find some savings to pass on to your taxpayers. It's saying do less for the people you serve. And I think that's what people need to understand. So many of the increases in the taxes that we've been forced to pass in the past several years just have to do with costs that we have no control over. Things like insurance premiums that are raising and things like road construction costs that are raising at a pace that far outpaces inflation. And needing to replace infrastructure that's often 100 years old or more, like those are not optional things for cities to do. That's what people of Decorah have made it clear they want, and the state government's saying you no longer have the power to provide those services to your constituents. Now, they weren't hiding their cards when they ran for office. They said that they were going to provide property tax relief. It just needs to be clear to the public that means therefore worse services from their cities.
Okay. Vacancies on the following boards and commissions. Telecommunication, 1, Civil Service Commission, 1. I did get an application for the Human Rights Commission, but it was too late to get it on the agenda in the Dropbox, so at least 1 will be forward. Board of Appeals, we still have 5. Sustainability Commission, 1. I'm setting the deadline for these for Thursday, February 16th, in order that we can get them on the agenda and get them in Dropbox. So if that news release could go out, that would be great. City manager, department heads, and council reports.
You've heard most of mine.
Carrie? Dave? Jeremy, how'd you like to come and show us what you brought home?
Yeah, I'll try to share a little bit of good news then. So,
Well, you've got more
yeah, I
than-
attended the Iowa Concrete Paving Association workshop last week, and we were presented with an award for the Locust Road project, monetary value of probably $15. So we're making progress if you want to sell that plaque. But
It-
We have one shop in town.
It's from the Iowa Concrete Paving Association Award of Excellence, presented to the City of Decorah in recognition of outstanding design and construction on Locust Road pavement replacement, Decorah, Iowa's best municipal streets, intersections, PCC paving projects, 2022. And didn't you say there were 8?
so they do this every year, and you know, the contractors, engineers on the job get one as well, get some recognition. But there was 86 projects nominated across like 17 categories. So it's a nice honor, I think, for the city. But yeah, unfortunately, not a lot of money, no big check that came with that. But
Campaign bonds with those.
But you also had some other news too,
yeah,
right?
so I did find out that we were awarded a grant from the USDA for a pilot project for community composting, just over $100,000. Actually, I've known for a little while, but was held to secrecy until last Thursday when the USDA made the announcement formal. So we'll issue a press release on that, but several community partners, Wenatchee County Conservation, Luther College, the co-op, as well as the Iowa State Solid Waste Reduction Center is going to help us with some training and workshops. So
And who'd you say does the news release for that?
we are going to draft one.
Okay.
The USDA
Okay.
has the official one, but we'll provide some with some more details on the project,
Okay.
what exactly we're planning. But it's a 2-year pilot, and the big picture goal is to try to incorporate more food waste into our city compost site. So we have a couple ideas for how to do that.
Great. Yeah. Mike?
Nothing new at this time, Mayor.
Chopper? Todd? Kristen?
They're all smiles after this week.
Let's go this way this time. Kurt?
Nothing, Mayor.
Cut that out.
Just tell them the truth.
Not in public meeting, okay?
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Steve Zittergren?
Just a word of thanks to all of our staff. Obviously, the request to look at your budget and find things to cut when I feel like you probably already felt like you did that when you were submitting your budgets initially. That's probably a really terrible exercise. So thank you for providing us with the information we need to make the best decisions we can given these terrible circumstances in the event we need to make them. I don't envy your work in that, but thanks for doing it.
Steve Luce?
Yeah, I'm aghast also at the House's efforts to cut benefits to SNAP recipients. Like poverty isn't really something people face each day. That's a crock, I think, what's coming through of showing no compassion at all for people who are without and trying to, they can't have 2 vehicles, even though there might be 2 people needing to go to work. Oh, you have a second vehicle? Now you need to cut your benefits because of it. It's disgusting. And please vote and change the country by making the State House pay attention that local people are tired of being ramrodded. That's it, Mayor.
Thanks for that,
Kirsten.
Thanks for that, Steve. Last Friday, the fire department had their gala out at Toppling Goliath. I think it went really well. It was a good crowd out there. My understanding is they raised over $80,000, which a great turnout for Decorah, and really kudos to the fire department for putting that on, Toppling Goliath. This Friday, they have a Wind Down Decorah, it's called, on Friday night from 5 to 8 p.m. Many of the businesses downtown, and combined with the restaurants and the breweries and things like that, they're going to be offering hors d'oeuvres and some drinks and things like that at some of the stores. So hopefully everybody in Decorah can get out and enjoy themselves in downtown Decorah this Friday night from 5 to 8. That's it.
Thanks for mentioning that. Emily?
Emily's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Emily already spent all weekend thinking about this.
Okay.
I also, I mean, this is taped, which is great. I wish that last week our MEU discussion had been taped as well. And I had some comments, but I'm going to save those about last week's not taped MEU discussion. I think Steve bringing up SNAP benefits, obviously as a school teacher, what's happening with vouchers and public money going to private schools, there is an onslaught in our state of what I would say is just bad will about what Iowa stands for and what Iowa has always been in my mind, why I stayed here, why I raised my kids here. And I am very disheartened. And I hope that voters are paying attention. I hope that people in Decorah are paying attention, and that we may write one letter, but I certainly hope that our representatives get a flood of letters from people from Decorah about these issues and more. Because it's just, you know, we all care about young people coming back to our state, and why would we encourage any young person to come here and buy a house and think about the services that they're not going to be getting here in Iowa? It's heart-wrenching. So I'll leave it at that and make other comments next week.
Okay. Randy?
I got nothing citywide, but congratulations to our girls wrestling team in the first sanctioned wrestling tournament, placing third, a state champion, but the rest of the team represented us very well, and the pictures I saw down there, wow, they underestimated the popularity of these young ladies
That's for sure.
and what they could do. I think we could have sold out any venue in Iowa and filled it up with spectators. So congratulations, ladies.
On that note, good luck to the basketball teams as they start on their journey for tournaments too.
Yeah, and the boys wrestling starts this weekend with
Okay.
their districts now. They do.
Okay, anything else? Move to adjourn?
So moved.